I had just turned 18 and I was moving from Vancouver to Toronto. The whole point of me going to Toronto was I knew that that's where the best law school in my country was, in Canada was. And my whole goal was if I did my undergrad at U of T, University of Toronto, if I did my undergrad there, then I'd already be situated in Toronto. So eventually I would be able to go to the law school. At least that was my thinking. And now I know now, obviously, that was a really, really bad idea. But I'll get to that in a moment. So on my way to Toronto, I've never been there before. I haven't met anybody there. I don't know a single person in Toronto. And I decided to get on the plane. And I remember with me, I had this massive body pillow. And like it was this thing that I used to sleep with in Vancouver. And I guess I would just sleep better with it. So I knew I had to bring this with me to the new city. So I had this massive body pillow. I had this huge like down jacket because for anyone who doesn't know, in Toronto it gets super, super cold. And so I brought this crazy big jacket. I have this pillow, this jacket. I have two suitcases, this massive backpack, and then I also have like a carry-on like thing with wheels. I have all these things and I'm getting on this plane. And I remember when I was on this plane, there was this group of about 8 people in front of me. And I guess they were stopping off in Toronto as a bit of a layover before they went to their next destination, which had to have only been something like some party destination. I'm not sure where. Maybe it was a Cancun or something like that. But they were just all wasted. And the plane ride from Vancouver to Toronto is about 5 hours. So this was 5 hours of these guys just being wasted. And I remember there was this one girl in front of me and she was just rocking back on her seat kind of like this, you know. And so I was trying to watch this little TV, the little screen they have on the airplanes, and the thing is just shaking because she's just constant, she's just drunk and she's just having a good time, you know. And then I guess she hears me sigh at one point and I just go, ugh, just because of how noisy they're being and just how being so crazy, right? And I'm all stressed, right? Like I'm going to university for the first time. I haven't met anybody, like I keep saying, like I was terrified. So she's rocking back on this chair, and I just remember her looking back through the seats and seeing me, and we kind of lock eyes. And she gets up and turns around, and she goes, "Hey, do you want a drink?" And I remember it so well because I wanted to say yes, but I was 18 and whatever, which the legal age for drinking in Canada is 19. And I wanted to say yes. I didn't say yes, but we kind of started talking, and she said, "So what are you doing? Where are you going?" And I told her, I said, "Oh, well, I'm going to school. I'm going to university." And she was so kind of excited for me immediately. And I was, at this point, I was really nervous. And she was kind of just like, "You're going to have like the best time of your life." And I'll never forget her saying, "You're going to have the best time of your life." And I was so excited. And that would ultimately lead me to my journey towards entrepreneurship. I just didn't know that yet. So anyway, I get to the University of Toronto, and where I was staying was basically U of T had bought a Hilton hotel, a whole Hilton hotel. And what they did was they turned it into a residence. So it ended up being like 2,000 university kids, both undergrads, graduate students, everything. And we were all in this building. So as you can imagine, there was like crazy parties. There was a really good cafeteria that I remember I ate so much at because it was basically all day, all night, or maybe it closed at like 11 p.m. actually, but all day anyway. Kind of all you can eat food. They had pizza, cookies, like fresh meals. They had salad bar, cereal bar, ice cream bar. They had everything. It was insane. But anyway, I got to this residence and I pull up and the cab pulls up right in front of it. And I look at it and it's this huge building and I'm just like, I see all these like university kids like running around. I can kind of see through the revolving door that most hotels have, right? This glass revolving door. I could see all these kids like running around and like I was so excited to get there. And that was the first time that, after the girl had talked to me on the plane, that I was really accepting of what she said. I was like, wow, like this is going to be the best time of my life. So anyway, I go through the revolving door. I go up to my room, and it looks like a hotel room, right? Because again, it's a hotel. But I get in there and I meet my roommate, who was a great guy. We still keep in touch. But that day there was this basically like it was like a mixer, but because a lot of us were underage, we weren't having alcohol, right? But again, being a hotel, it had like a whole meeting room, like almost like a presentation room, right, with like chairs and everything. So with a little stage. So I went down there with my roommate, and on the way down, a lot of people from our floor, which obviously it was the time where everyone was going down for this big meeting. A lot of people from our floor, we kind of met and mingled with and whatever. We got in these elevators, we head down to the meeting. And, they kind of welcome us. They say, "Welcome to U of T. This is a great school. You guys made a great choice," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Talking to us about the residence we were staying in and all the history that it had and all this kind of stuff, right? And the kind of story of the residence. And it was really, really cool. Super exciting. And this is kind of the build up to eventually me meeting a really, really special person. So at that meeting, and we kind of just brushed shoulders, we didn't have too many conversations at the time. But this guy, he basically would turn out to be the guy that would lead me towards entrepreneurship. So we ended up kind of brushing shoulders, and we're talking. There's about 6 or 7 of us that are all kind of just young guys, just talking about how exciting, university is going to be, all the things that you would imagine young men are excited for at university. And basically none of them include studying. So anyway, we're talking, whatever. And as the days and weeks go by, it's probably maybe about week 5, week 6. And this guy who was not on our floor, became really good friends with a lot of people on our floor. So what would happen is he would come up very often to see some of his friends, and I kind of see him and say, what's up, whatever. And then we kind of run into each other in the cafeteria and things like that. And we became closer and closer. And then, slowly we began to actually become really good friends. And to this day, he's still a really good friend of mine. Now fast forward to this is all year 1. So fast forward now to about year 2. Yeah, this is year 2 of university. And he's now moved out of the residence, and he's moved into this amazing apartment, beautiful apartment. Him and another one of my good friends moved in together, and amazing apartment. And I would go over to their place, and it was on the 56th floor. Okay, this building has 79 floors, right? They were on the 56th, and they had a beautiful corner unit that got both the sunrise and the sunset. So I would love to go over there and hang out with them whenever I got a chance. So one day, we're kind of hanging out, and something was on his computer. I went into his room again because he had an amazing view of the city, amazing view of Toronto, and we were in his room hanging out, and something was on his computer screen. And I asked him, I said, "Hey man, what's that?" And he said, "Oh, nothing. It's just some project I'm working on. No big deal, whatever." And I kind of knew there was something there, and I was like, "No, dude, what is that? What's on your computer screen there?" And he said, "Okay, I kind of just started doing this thing online where I'm trying to make some money online, and it's going okay." And I was like, "Make money online? Like, what do you mean make money online?" So mind you, this is the first time it's ever been brought to my attention that you can do your own thing, right? I'd gone to school to become a lawyer, like I mentioned, and that would mean working for someone else, most likely working in a firm or something like that. And so this was the first time that had ever crossed my mind that you could make your own money. I mean, if you can go and regularly go out and make your own money, you don't need to work for anybody else. I mean, and even if you want to work for someone else, you have the option to do it yourself once your mind is exposed to the fact that you can. So this is the first time ever. And he explains to me a little bit about what he was doing. Now, for those of you who are interested, here's essentially what he was doing. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to get this right, because I'm not nearly as technical as he was, and he was really good with code and all this kind of stuff. And again, this may not have even required code, but here's what he was doing. He had purchased basically a terabyte of cloud space, or maybe several terabytes of cloud space. And essentially what he would do is he would cut up this cloud space, this cloud computing space, and he would basically on each one, let's say into like 10 gigabyte pieces. And on each one, he would place like a virtual desktop. So when you'd log on to one 10 gigabyte portal, and you'd log into one of them, there would be, your whole desktop layout. You'd have all the kind of the applications that you use, et cetera, all of your like saved stuff that you did from last time you logged into it. You'd basically go to a website, you'd log in, and you'd have access to your like a virtual desktop, I guess. And so what he did is he bought a terabyte or a couple terabytes, and he divided that into a whole bunch of pieces, and then he would essentially he would have people pay him monthly, like on a subscription service, in order for them to have access to their kind of cloud computing. So the whole idea here was that you could access your sort of desktop or whatever, and this was a little bit probably before maybe everything was on the cloud. But basically he gave people access to accessing their desktop and all of their saved sort of documents and everything, their spreadsheets and everything that they had. And he would choose, and he would charge a small fee. And he had told me that he had, a couple of customers, but his first one was this guy that found him somehow from Lithuania. So my friend has nothing to do with Lithuania. He's not Lithuanian, to the best of my knowledge. And he wasn't doing any really outreach. He wasn't really doing any marketing. So now 2 really important ideas are kind of on my mind, right? The first one is that you don't need to work for somebody else. If you look at all of these businesses, you walk down the street and you see a McDonald's, and you see a this, and you see a CVS, and you see a that, and you see whatever, right? I had just kind of always accepted those as things that must have always existed, right? As you might as well. But the reality is that somebody came up with these businesses and they started at nothing. Most of them started at nothing. And then they grew into these huge mega empires, right? And again, this was the first idea that really crossed my mind, was that all businesses are started by people from somewhere, right? And now the second thing was that your business doesn't need to be a brick and mortar, right? Because even if I had the idea about, a business before this, I would have thought, okay, I guess I could set up a lemonade stand at the end of the street and, people might pay me for the drink, and I just better hope that it costs me less to get the lemons and the sugar and the water than it does to, sell it to the person. I can make more money when they actually purchase it than what I need to spend to provide it to them. So the idea of the business and the idea of it being kind of like outside of national borders, right? You could sell to people online anywhere in the world, and you could sell anything, really. And this was kind of the first time I was exposed to the idea, and he had told me, that he was making a little bit of money. So I kind of asked, and at this point, full disclosure, I was still getting an allowance from my mother to live, right? And I think this was maybe, I was getting like $250 a month or something, but also mind you, right? She was covering my, schooling and my food. I didn't really have any expenses. So me having $250 a month, or whatever it was, I think it was about that, may have been a little bit more. But me having that was, that was a lot of money. That was all I knew. I had some friends that were paying for their school themselves, right? And so everything that they would try to buy would come out of, further put them into debt. And so for me, that was a really good position. So I was kind of like, okay, he says it makes a little bit of money. Like, I'm expecting to hear that he's making, $100, $200. And so I said, how much are you making, man? Like, how much money's coming in from this thing that you're doing? And he said, right now I'm doing about $1,000 a month. And look, that might not be a lot. You might hear that number through the screen right now and think that's not a lot of money. But keep in mind, he had done zero marketing whatsoever. He had done nothing to try and entice people to purchase his product or subscribe to his service. He had done nothing. So people had just naturally found him. Some from, again, like Lithuania. I think he had like one or two in like Chile or something like that. And this idea that you could sell to people became addictive to me. This idea that you could sell your own thing on your own time became addictive to me. And so, once he'd shared this with me and this idea hit my mind, it completely changed the way I saw the world. Now, I became obsessed with it. I really became obsessed with it. I really liked it. I'd always been someone who was kind of liked to kind of go my own way. And I just didn't really have an outlet to do that. Ever since I was in elementary school and even high school, there was even some times where, I'd have friends who didn't want to be with me in group projects because, they thought I was too disruptive or I wouldn't do my work or I was stupid or whatever it was, whatever they thought, But it resulted ultimately in me having to go my own way a lot of times and being kind of a stranger guy, a weird guy. And so this sort of idea got into my brain and it didn't let go. And so what I began to do was obsess with reading. I went back to my friend and I said, hey man, like, how did this start for you? And he introduced me to this guy that you may have heard of. He said, Elon Musk. Okay. Now this is before Elon was everywhere. Okay. This is like early Hyperloop Elon Musk. For any of you guys who know that project, like this is early, right? So and then I kind of realized he had all these books he was really into physics. He had all these books about physics and et cetera, but then he had a bunch of like Elon Musk related stuff that and he'd written Elon Musk in like a notebook a few times. Like I saw the name, I knew the name, but I didn't really know the significance until I kind of looked into him a little bit. But anyway, I kind of had asked my buddy, I said, hey man, like if you were going to start learning how you were doing what you're doing now, if you were going to start learning today, what would you do? And he said to me, like, I'd probably read about it. I'd probably learn about it. And I was like, okay, perfect. Reading. Yes. Duh. Obvious. So I asked him for some book recommendations and he gave me 2. Now, I'm not going to tell you these are the best book recommendations in the world. These are just the ones that got me sort of started. And again, if I would recommend to my past self what books to start with, I may not recommend these ones, but for me, they worked. So this is what really fed my addiction of this kind of entrepreneurship that was really growing in my mind and in my heart. So what it was the first one was called Thrive. So the book Thrive is essentially a compilation of different stories of people that you will have heard of, some of them you will not have heard of, that basically talk about their success stories. So this is everything from Sylvester Stallone and the fact that he had to, he sold his dog. He sold his dog in order to pay for one of the Rocky movies, right? Because it was the last dollars he had to try and produce this movie. And then Rocky ended up blowing up and then he bought his dog back. And it's this amazing story, right? Then there's other stories. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger. We have all of these like entrepreneurs that you may not have heard of. We have Bill Gates. We have all these different people in this book Thrive. So I do actually, coming to think of it as I'm speaking to you, I do actually recommend it because it exposes you to the trials and tribulations that so many people that have achieved great things, it exposes you to their real story. And so it's a really easy way to get into understanding, hey, there are individuals that go their own way, which is something ultimately that I recommend to you guys on the other side of the camera. So that was the first book, was called Thrive. I believe you can find it. I think I actually found it for free. I think you might be able to download it maybe on the Books app or something like that for free. But anyway, it's a really short book. It's maybe 100 pages, and each story is maybe 3 or 4. So there you go. And the second book you probably will have heard of. It's called Think and Grow Rich. Now, I know the author Napoleon Hill has had a lot of kind of criticism and saying that maybe he kind of faked some of his stuff and some of his interviews and some of his reports and his studies and whatever. But regardless, it doesn't really matter if what he said was true. The question you need to ask yourself is it helpful? And for me at the time, it was. It was incredibly helpful. It goes into so many different things about what you really need to do to have the mindset to be successful. It's not really about giving you tips about how you get successful and what exact sort of business strategy you're going to take. But what it does do for you is it really helps you flesh out that mindset you need to have, understanding that failure is your friend, because failure is not actually the end of the road. Failure is just showing you one way not to do something, right? They say famously that, Edison, he tried 1,000 different filaments or whatever before he was able to make the light bulb. And when he was asked how he was able to persist 1,000 times so that the 1,001st time was the light bulb, he was asked how he dealt with that. And he said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just learned 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And, he kind of just began to, by process of elimination, ultimately get to where he was going. So the book, Think and Grow Rich, really kind of funnels you into that mindset of being like, look, things are not going to work out to begin with. They won't. But eventually, if you keep going, you will not lose. If you keep running the race, you will not lose. That is the idea. So again, the books are Thrive and Think and Grow Rich. Those are the ones that he had recommended to me. Now, I'd begin to read those and read those and read those. And I reread both of them probably about 3 or 4 times in maybe 6 weeks or so. Now, I wasn't the biggest reader before that. I had only really read a couple of books, maybe. But this really kind of solidified the whole idea that reading is so important. And this is what finally solidified my entrepreneurial journey, is that as I began to read, I began to immerse myself in this world that taught me, here's what I want to be doing. I resonated so strongly with the people I was reading. When I read an autobiography, I resonated so strongly. I looked up to that person immediately. I thought, wow, you did it from this place. You did it from this place where you knew nothing. And then you got there. Right? And then I'd read a more strategic book where it wasn't necessarily an autobiography. It wasn't a story that would bring me through everything. But what it would give me context for the story that I read in terms of these little things, these little dials that could have been turned up just a little bit, or these little buttons that could have been pushed, that would have given the person in the story maybe a little advantage to go even faster or whatever. And so what would happen is, as I would immerse in these stories and I'd begin to hear more and more of these people who are successful, while also reading books that talked about strategies of how to do even better than some people have done in the past, and people who look back on their past and then give strategic advice. As these two things began to happen, I began to see kind of opportunities, and I would think, hey, that's a good business opportunity. This is a good business opportunity. And then I got to the point ultimately where I started a couple things. Some worked out better than others. Most of them didn't do that well. But eventually we got to a point where I was able to have the honor of being, respected amongst my friend group who was doing really, really, was in a similar sort of boat where they were pushing to build businesses and stuff like that, where I was kind of seen as one of the people who was a little bit more researched because of my obsession that came all the way back from my friend talking about this business that made $1,000 a month, that he then recommended a couple of random books that I read that turned into an obsession, that turned into immersion, that turned into entrepreneurship. So ultimately, I guess I want to leave you guys with this. If you don't know where to start and you don't know what to do, start immersing yourself. Because nobody that creates anything good does it from not having... Nobody that creates anything good does it without having consumed things that are good. It doesn't just happen. That's not the way it happens, okay? You need to understand that you need to fill your head with good ideas, and only then will your brain be able to produce those ideas in a novel circumstance. Meaning you're going to be able to think, I read that book about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever you like. I read that book, and this new idea in this new context at this time, in the world, 2024, I see some relevance. I see how I can connect some dots, and I could just change a couple things over here and I could apply it to this new business. And so if you're in a position where you're beating yourself up because you don't know what business to start or you don't know how to improve, it's not necessarily all up to you. You can rely on the minds of people who've come before you and stand on the shoulders of giants. But to do that, you need to have a habit of really immersing yourself in the content that reflects the way you want to be in the world. So ultimately, guys, that's where I'm going to leave you. That is my journey of how I found and fell in love with entrepreneurship, and why I'm going to keep going and keep working in any business I can that I feel that really kind of fuels that fire. And I can't lie to you guys, Must Become has a lot of those elements. A lot of things that I share with you, I've read and I've learned from people that are so much smarter than I am, so much greater than I am, and I'm so happy to be able to share it with you. So I'm grateful also that you might consider this channel as a way that you can immerse in these ideas and this mindset of things that can carry you to the place you want to be, whether or not it's entrepreneurship, doing just better for your family, just doing better for yourself, whatever it is. It's about becoming the man that you must become. So with that said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Spencer with Must Become. Always remember that your potential is your obligation, and so what you can become, you must become.